In the broad scope of things, home recording is a rather recent phenomenon, but in the few short decades that it's existed, it has literally reshaped the way musicians and songwriters interact with the music industry and with their fans. And things continue to develop at lightning speed. Now, if you as a songwriter have a grasp of how and why we got to where we are, you'll be better able to take advantage of the technology to save you time and give you the tools that you need to meet your songwriting goals. Hi, I'm Brian from Unmute Your Muse TV, where we teach 5-minute masterclasses for songwriters. We use the Gold Song Solution to help you write the kinds of songs that people will love, buy, and tell their friends about. The main takeaway for this week is home recording is freedom and power for the independent songwriter. For a second week in a row, I'm going to be talking about a topic that's not exactly songwriting per se, but which is intimately connected with it. And while I know a fair bit about home recording, that's not exactly what Unmute Your Muse is all about. We teach songwriting. However, almost every songwriter is going to be doing some home recording at some point along the line, so I thought it would be worthwhile for me to share some of my thoughts about how best to approach the idea, specifically from a songwriter's point of view. And in fact, I've got so many thoughts that we've decided to make this into a little mini-series. This video and the ones that follow aren't going to be how-to videos so much as they are a compass that gets you pointed in the right direction as you start your home recording journey. If this is something you decide to take seriously, I'll point you to some more in-depth resources later on. All right, let's get started. First, a little history. Now, if history's not exactly your thing, well, that's a shame. Just think of this as a story about a plucky band of songwriters that took the tools that they were given and used them to liberate themselves from the oppressive forces of industry. Something like that. Now, although humans have been playing music probably since before we were even Homo sapiens, recordings of that music that you could actually play back and listen to are relatively recent. The first listenable audio recording is attributed to Thomas Edison. Yes, the same guy who invented the light bulb. He made a phonograph machine that worked on a wax cylinder in 1877. Not exactly high fidelity, but it did get the recording industry up and running. New recording technology started to come out almost immediately. 10 years later, we got the first disc-shaped recording. Shortly thereafter, the invention of the vacuum tube allowed for electricity to start getting involved in the process, and microphones and loudspeakers soon followed. By the era of the First World War, the first real radio broadcasts were happening, which allowed people all over the world to hear music that was performed at a different time and in a different country. People were blown away. The industry exploded from there. Record labels emerged and joined forces with the broadcasting companies. Music went from being primarily a live and local activity to a global industry controlled by big corporations. Recording technology remained prohibitively expensive for the next few decades. And unless you were fortunate enough to land a record deal, most songwriters had no hopes of getting any of their music recorded or widely distributed. Now, by the 1970s, there started to be the first glimmers of change. Early digital recording was invented, though at this point that was still happening on magnetic tapes and was largely unaffordable for the average musician. And then, in 1979, a new era dawned with the release of Tascam's Teak-144. This was the first reasonably priced multi-track recorder that working musicians, independent artists, or even high school garage bands could use to produce their own recordings. Now, the quality was nowhere near what you could get in a major studio, and certainly not even close to what you can do today at home, but it was liberating. For the first time in decades, local musicians were starting to pull themselves out from under the thumb of the label broadcast industrial complex. You no longer needed to save up hundreds or even thousands of dollars to go into a professional studio just to make a demo tape to send to a record label. Now you could do it from your own garage. Or, if musicians wanted to forego the big business entirely, they could make decent enough recordings to sell to their local following. It was still tough going, but we were starting to have more options. And as it always does, technology continued to get better and cheaper. Pro Tools was the first major digital recording platform, and when they started marketing directly to home recording artists in the late 1990s, whole new worlds started to open up for small artists. Now we could make 24-track recordings, edit them, add a wide range of effects, and mix them all together, all from the comfort of our bedrooms. Simultaneously, the internet was exploding, and early platforms like MySpace allowed independent artists to share music that they recorded at home with fans from around the world without any major labels even being involved in the process. The first version of iTunes came out in 2001, which allowed independent musicians to sell the digital music that they recorded at home to an online audience. In fact, in the 2000s, independent artists started to become so powerful, writing, recording, mixing, and distributing all of their music all on their own, that some of the major record labels started to fail. And then in the 2010s, things continued to evolve at a rapid pace. Technology continued to become better and cheaper over time. iPods and smartphones were widely used so that people all over the world could carry around whole libraries of digital music right in their pocket. And there were more and more options for home studios, both so far as hardware and software go. By the end of that decade, video streaming had advanced to the point where musicians could even collaborate with other musicians on the other side of the world, writing and recording songs together from a distance. So now here we are in 2020. Where do things stand? Music is everywhere, and I mean seriously, almost everywhere we go, there's music playing. In every room of the house, in the car, in public, in our earbuds. And because of the wide availability and affordability of recording technology, more and more people are able to create and distribute music that they hear in their heads. There is more technological power crammed into your smartphone than songwriters a few short decades ago could even have dreamed of. In fact, unlike songwriters from almost every other period of history who were constantly wishing for more and cheaper technology, we've got almost the opposite problem. Many songwriters today feel totally overwhelmed by the array of options out there and the complexity that goes along with some of that. And don't think for a second that things are anywhere near finished. Processing power continues to increase, allowing more technology to be crammed into smaller and smaller spaces. New software, acoustic and virtual instruments, interfaces, and microphones continue to be created. And who knows what crazy ideas are coming next. If history is any clue, I'd say that we're in for a whole lot of surprises. Now, you may be thinking, okay, great, Brian, thanks for the history lesson, but seriously, what was the point? How does any of this affect me as a songwriter? Well, now that's a great question, and I'm glad you asked. So, besides the obvious point that this stuff is endlessly fascinating in its own right, here's the main point that I'd like you to take away from this. As I was going through that history, did you notice how that every step along the way, musicians and songwriters were given more freedom and control over their own work? Both freedom in the sense of having the ability to manifest their musical ideas, and in the sense of not being entirely controlled by the industry. Let me give you an example. Imagine a songwriter back at the time of the last great pandemic, the Spanish flu of 1908. Now imagine that they wrote an incredibly moving song that offered hope and encouragement to people who were suffering from the illness and its effects. Now what could they do with that song? Not much. They could play it live for people who lived near them, and if they were lucky, some other musicians might pick it up and play it live for their friends. The best possible scenario would be for a publishing company to pick up the song and sell sheet music of it on a regional or maybe national basis. Then fast forward to today. If a modern songwriter were to write a similar song, they could, using just the technology in their pocket, write, record, produce, mix, and distribute their song all on their own. And within a few hours of coming up with the idea, hundreds, thousands, or even millions of people all over the entire world could be listening to that song. And with just a little more work, they could even produce an accompanying video. Now that's freedom. That's influence. That's power. Just think about that for a second. Think about the difference in reach between the songwriter from 1908 and today. A good song with a good message can have an impact exponentially bigger now than it ever could have had in the past. And you don't necessarily have to have massive amounts of cash to be able to create high-quality music at home. And if you don't believe that's possible, you don't need to look any farther than this year's Grammys. Billie Eilish cleaned up, and almost all of her music was recorded and produced by her and her brother in his bedroom. Okay, now here's the other side of that coin. Yes, there is the potential for a songwriter to write and record something at home, and for that recording to go out and change the world. But the vast majority of home recordings don't have an impact anything close to those examples that I just gave. And there are a couple of reasons for that. For one thing, many home recordings just honestly aren't that good. And that's understandable. We independent artists have to wear so many hats. We can't be good at all of them. We can't be expert instrumentalists, vocalists, lyricists, composers, arrangers, audio engineers, producers, mixers, distributors, and social media gurus. You just can't be good at everything. And honestly, that goes to show you why sometimes record companies and labels can actually be a good thing. They can have experts at each of those things all work together to create an incredibly polished, finished product. And then there's the fact that just so much music is being made right now. So much, in fact, that even every genius-level song can't possibly attain worldwide notoriety. There are simply too many of them being made. So what are we songwriters to do? Is it even worth our time, money, and effort to learn how to do home recording? And if it is, then how on earth do we decide what hardware and software to buy? And where on earth do we go to learn how to use it all in a way that we can understand? Well, for the answer to those and many more questions, you'll have to check out part 2 of this little mini-series on home recording for songwriters, where we're going to talk about how to decide what role home recording should have in your musical life and how best to get started. In the meantime, keep on writing.